This call is being recorded.
Hello and welcome back to Living as a Survivor Telesummit. We are in our third hour and our third survivor is ready to speak her truth. But before we get started, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for another opportunity to have a platform and to have a wonderful speaker that is ready to share her story. Cover those that are on the call and those that are present on the computer as well, that they get the healing and the answers that they need if they're not in the stage of healing to begin their healing. In your name I pray. Amen. So before we get started, as we've done on every single call, we have to place a trigger warning on the information that will be presented because of the content and the nature of the call. So due to the nature of the content, a trigger warning has been placed on this call. If you experience flashbacks, emotional feelings, or a memory recall during the interview or as a guest on the call, stop immediately, take a deep breath, regroup, and then resume. If that doesn't work, you have the right to discontinue the interview or end the call. We are not here to re-victimize anyone. So that is your right to get off the call or stop the interview if necessary. So I wanted to kind of go back over a few points from the previous speaker, Miss Angie Moss. She talked about how she identified with molestation versus rape, although she was raped. Her main the thing that she recalled the most, the incident that she recalled the most was the molestation. She talked about how the main two events the age for the main two events that she remembered was 8 and 21. How she had a lot of miscarriages. A lot of abortions, not miscarriages. A lot of abortions. That was the previous caller. And how she went from one home from her mom that was actually beating her. She went from molestation to physical abuse. Then she moved in with her grandmother, and then she met the next perpetrator. So there was just a lot of different avenues and a lot of different points that overall stem from sexual abuse and the things that she had been going through. And what I do want to, and then earlier we talked about boundaries and with Dr. Porter. And what I'm finding on these calls and these speakers, especially since yesterday, is that we have to learn the difference between hearing and listening. And I'm hearing a lot that if there was somebody present for me to listen to, that would actually listen to me and be present when I needed to tell my story, or somebody cared enough to ask me what was going on when they saw things happening to me, then maybe my story would have been a little different. Not to say you still wouldn't have had to go through the healing process and still had areas of your life where you needed help in, but the listening part is like a common thread that keeps coming up. And I wanted to really say that and just give a kind of a tip and more of a just be active, just advice, just be active. Try to learn how to be an active listener and not just hear the parts of the whatever the child is saying to you just enough for you to be pissed off or think that they're talking about you, and then you make it about you. If you actually listen to what they're saying, you'll hear exactly what it is that you need to know from the child and be able to give them that support. And if you don't feel like you're equipped to give them that support, then allow somebody else to be present to give them that support. Don't make it about, oh, well, he told me or she told me, and you just need to get over it. I don't have time for that. Stop. We have to learn how to stop making it about us, even though we may still have work to do in our own lives. When it comes to child abuse, and if a child is coming to you and needs help, it's about them in that moment. And I think just my personal opinion is that, and from my own experience, that we have to practice active listening. So let's get into our next call. Well, our next speaker, Miss Juanita. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I am doing well. It has been a powerful day and a half, and I am grateful to have you present. And I'm thankful that you even wanted to be a part. So, before we get into your survivor story, what when you were when you saw the post, because I remember you actually responded to a post about the telesummit, and I was looking for speakers. What about the subject and the actual event that attracted you, or you wanted to actually be a part of it?
Okay. About this is 20th, about 3 or 4 years ago was the first time I like physically actually told my story in front of an audience. And I had some challenges, some issues, and I kind of just shut down a little bit. And with everything that had been going on in the environment with the Me Too movement, God was just challenging me as a way to say, you have to get back out there. You have to, there's a purpose with your story. You have to show other people and tell other people what you're doing in your day to day. So, like 2 days later, and I don't know what time of night, I was just scrolling through Facebook and I saw that post. And it was just like, okay, God, I'm listening. And that's why I went ahead and say, okay, what do I need to do? Because I was having conversations and there's so many people who I've been able to minister to offline who tell me you really need to get back out there. And so this was the opportunity to be able to assist and help someone else in their own journey of healing while I'm still going through mine.
Great, great. That's. I'm glad that you said yes. I want to do it. So, after you made that decision and you reached out to me, did any emotions come up for you since it had been a couple of years since you told your story? Were you starting to feel stuff that you hadn't felt in a while about telling your story? Were you anxious?
I was anxious, and what I think the biggest thing for me was really getting back into that zone of preparing and ministering. I was an active singer at one point, then I've kind of stopped over the years, and just I started enjoying music again, really meditating and praying and really going back into my word, because that's the one thing that grounds me when I prepare. Anytime I prepare to speak, I say minister, because it's going to help someone else. So in preparation, and realize I would stop missing and stop doing those things. And my imagination had begun to run wild with me. So this began in preparation for this has begun to put me back where God had originally had me in the journey of really getting out there and telling my story.
That's great. I'm glad you're getting ready to go back out there. That's as you see, it's definitely needed, and it takes us survivors to be able to provide that platform and that opportunity for somebody else to have that release like we've had. So thank you for that. So we're going to get started into your story. So what age were you when the sexual abuse started, and what type of sexual abuse was performed?
I was 5 years old. Um, my mother was a heroin addict, and me and my younger brother suffered tremendous like physical abuse starting leading up to this point. And one day she was looking for her next hit and she didn't have any money. And that was the day I became her currency so that she could get her drugs. And so it would be for a long time at various people, you would have some of her dealers that be like, we're not going to do that. But a lot of them did. They didn't care. They were getting what they wanted. She was getting what she wanted.
So you became her currency. So how often was that exchange made?
It's daily,
Daily.
daily. Um, from 5 until I was about, we moved in with, I guess, a girlfriend of hers. And if it wasn't her dealers or people she was getting her drugs from, it was the girl, the daughter that we were living with, her friend's daughter, because it was like, oh, well, so, this is what your mother do, this is what you're supposed to do. So at that point, it became normal for me.
Wow.
It was like, okay, it wasn't like something that shouldn't happen. And so now the beating, I knew we couldn't take that, but because it was such ingrained at such a young age, that spirit had been implanted at such a young age, and we're not equipped to deal with that. We're not equipped to deal with the emotions and stuff that comes with being sexually aroused. So at one point you're conflicted because your body enjoyed it, but you don't know why. So it becomes a day in and day out. I remember going to my grandmother's house and it wouldn't happen there. So I thought they were crazy and they were weird because nobody touched me there. I could sleep in my own bed and not have to worry about anything. So I thought they were weird.
So was it a male or a female that was your perpetrator? Both. And you said this happened daily, which
daily.
is a lot for a 5-year-old. A lot for anybody, especially a 5-year-old. Was it
daily?
Was
those who could not insert their penis, they would use objects. They would, do oral, which I know what is now. I didn't know then what it is, but they would do oral. They would do anything that they could to get their rocks off. They would either have me perform oral, and they stopped doing that when I bit them once. I didn't know what I was doing, so it was just like, no, we're not going to do that. So it would be objects, and now I know what they are, like dildos, but as a child, you don't know what that is. You just see objects, and it's just like, okay, they get something small enough that can it was just, now when I think about it, it was just perverted, but they were going to do whatever they could to get their money's worth for giving my mother her drugs.
And not how often, because you told me daily, but how long, if you can recall, did that go on as far as years?
I was 8 years old when I was staying with my mother. She had beat me for the last time. We were black and blue. She was coming out off a high. And I remember waking up one morning and getting her machete that she hid and telling her, sitting on her lap and telling her that if she ever hit us again, I would kill her. And she dropped us off to a friend and I never saw her again. But that didn't stop the more so being molested, because now we're at her friend's house who lives in a rooming house, and all that lives up there is pimps and prostitutes.
Wow.
So imagine a 7.5, 8-year-old little girl telling a prostitute how she can get more money by doing certain things. So I'm able to do things and say things that I don't fully understand, but that no child should know how to do to a man or woman.
Wow.
And yeah, it's crazy.
That's a lot. It's like, and just at the, let's okay, the abuse is there, and which shouldn't have happened, of course, but then you're talking about like it's been done to you so much and so long that now you can tell an adult how they can get more money because you've had all this unwanted sexual experience. Like this is 8. That's a lot.
Yeah.
How were you going to school, or what was your childhood?
At this point, we had been taken out of school when my mother dropped us off at her friends, and because I suffer from asthma, it did not trigger the school to say that I was missing school, because I did miss periods of school where I had to be hospitalized. So what happened was a teacher had ran into my grandmother because my grandmother was looking for us, and the teacher was like, we haven't seen her in months. We don't know if she's in the hospital. And so it was, I think, a couple of weeks after that, my mother's friend ran into my grandmother and was like, I have the kids. I've been trying to find you guys. So I remember that day kind of being rescued from more so because you get tired of sleeping on the floor, getting tired. I was a very fierce protector of my brother. So there was a lot of things that I took in protection of him because he was, to me, that was like, let him be okay. I mean, he suffered a lot of physical abuse, but no sexual abuse. And I just was like, you're not going to do that to him. So I was always protective of him. So to kind of be in an environment where there was somebody else that could look after him, I wasn't even thinking about myself when they drove up to come and get us, and I was about going on 9, I was 8.5 years ago, going on 9 when we moved to Massachusetts. My grandmother picked us up and moved to Massachusetts with her sister. And I think I had a respite of maybe about a year of no one abusing me or things like that, because my grandmother kind of kept a real tight rein. And I didn't understand why at the time she was doing it. I just thought she was just me. And why can't I do what I want to do? Because now I have the mentality of an adult. I don't know what it's like to be a child. I don't know what that is. I've been introduced to the adult world, and that's all I know, is how to make sure my little brother's okay and to make it happen, whether it's getting food, whatever we needed. And so we was very involved with the church. Very involved. And I remember when her sister, my aunt, died, we did depend on family and a lot of the members from the church to kind of help with us, because she was my grandmother. She had custody and she was in her 80s, so she couldn't always, do the things in need and whatever. But church people took advantage of that. And it was like, okay, well, if you want me to take your grandmother to go shopping or whatever, you're going to do this. So you do it because, again, you don't know there's nothing wrong with it. Because, oh yeah, I just had a break, but this is now normal. Because again, even though I had that respite and I was with my grandmother, I was just thinking, these people are weird. Like, nobody sleeps with other people and nobody comes in my room. And I had a bed. So that was, something different too. Like, I had a bed. I had my first bed that I actually slept in when I was 9. So these were just all these new things. But then what I knew was normal came back. And how old was I? I was about 16 when it finally stopped, because I just decided to tell my abuser that I'm just going to just tell your wife and your colleagues outside of the church, because the church didn't care. I was labeled as being fast, being, promiscuous, and all by the people who was abusing me, so that even if I was to say anything, nobody would believe me, because, you must have just been flaunting it in front of somebody, for them to do that to you, or for them to, want to sleep with you, because that's, you were fast already. So you suffer in silence. And you don't know it's wrong. And I think Oprah Winfrey did a show. I remember watching, I loved Oprah Winfrey's show, and I remember watching a show, and they were talking about abuse. And that was the first time that I realized that what had happened to me should have never happened to me, and it was wrong. And that kind of sent me in a spiral, because now my life as I knew it didn't really exist. So what I thought was normal and what I thought was supposed to happen on a daily basis really was something that should have never happened. And now I had to find a new normal. And then dealing with the death of my mother. My mother had died from HIV/AIDS That same year I graduated high school, and now I'm in a spiral because I can't get the answers from her as to why she put me in a situation like that and why she didn't love me enough to protect me or to care for us. And then with no one to talk to because there was nothing, everyone was like, oh, well, you let it happen until you were 16. Well, why didn't you stop it? And I'm just like, so you stop, you shut down, you just don't say anything anymore because nobody wants to understand. And it's now your fault that you were violated.
There was so many moving parts in that that I can relate to. Like when you talked about going to your grandmother and her picking you up and you moving, you know, into that new environment to Massachusetts. But even when you went to church, like I'm wondering, like what was your mental state when it was when nobody was touching you, when nobody was molesting you? Like were you, because you said you were like, this is weird, like why is nobody messing with me and why is nobody on me? Like what did that feel like? That didn't even, I know that didn't seem normal like you said, but were you still getting in trouble or how was that?
What happened was is I was already an introvert, but I became a very introverted person. Um, the only time I would probably communicate or be around people is when I would sing on the choir or if there was music. I would read a lot. I didn't have a lot of friends. I put up a wall of superiority, like I'm better than you, just to keep people away because I just didn't know how to react or in the environment, what do I talk about with to people? What do I say? Because all I know is, you know, somebody's touching me and this is just my way of life. So music became kind of just um, a soothing thing for me, but it also became my escape. Also, reading became my escape because there was never anyone to talk to, and there was nothing. Even searching in libraries, I couldn't find a book to explain what I was going through or why I was feeling this way. And I didn't want to really say anything to my grandmother because she was older, and I didn't want her. I saw what she went through when she had to take us and when she had to put my mother out so many times. That was her child. So I just was like, I didn't want to burden anybody else with how I was feeling. So I kept it bottled up. So I became a cold, unfeeling person.
Mm,
That became my norm.
wow. So and I can see, definitely see why that would happen because especially if you're in a space where you don't feel like anybody's really understanding what's going on with you and you can't tell nobody, like you mentioned, suffering in silence. It, if you didn't have the music and the books to kind of keep your mind occupied, it's like where would you have even been mentally? So it's almost like that saved your life for the time, at least it got you through those moments until you went to church and they start messing with you again. So then that, because that was normal to you, you didn't see anything wrong with it because
Abs-
that's what you were used to.
Yep.
So in church, was it male and female?
Male. I grew up in Pentecostal church, and so women just weren't really, women weren't in charge. So it was mostly your men, those that were married. They were the deacons, the ministers, who just use the "I'm coming to help the family," and they're just perverts. They look. It's like predators know who they can prey on, and it wasn't until I learned that it was something that they're attracted to. They look at how is a person isolated. Do they have a lot of friends? Do they have family that can look out for them? They see that and then they take advantage of that.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yes, definitely, and it goes into that the grooming. because, and that's what I thought of when you were talking about you giving the advice to the adult female about how she can make more money. It's like, how do you, the things you look for as far as grooming, and what to look for, how to, what advice would you give to a parent when it comes to um, a perpetrator grooming them for possible sexual abuse? Like you mentioned the isolation. What other things would you see as a sign if you came across a child like that?
Um, a child who acts out for no apparent reason. Like there's just no reason behind why they're acting out. Or they're saying sexually suggestive things that no child, I don't care if they're watching television, should know or say. If they're, you know, over enthused about certain body parts, you know, those are key things. If they're quiet around certain people, because that was another key that I think my grandmother picked up on, and she used to try to keep me from certain people, because we would be like, if we would go to church or whatever, and I would be talking and whatever, and then certain people would come around and I would just shut down. And you know, I think in her own way she tried to protect me, but just didn't know how. So if you have a child that, you know, it's just all of a sudden they're exuberant and then they get around certain people or certain situations and they shut down, you need to investigate that. Another thing is, stop forcing children to sit on people's laps and to give people hugs and to, you know, be intimate with people that they're not comfortable with or don't know. Because once you do that, you then you take down a boundary that's their own natural protector, because now it's like, well, mommy said I have to hug them. So now it goes from, oh, well, your mother said you had to hug me, to, well, if you don't sit on my lap, I'm gonna tell your mother. Or if you don't do this, I'm gonna tell your mother. So stop forcing children. I don't care if it's cousins, uncles, grandpas, I don't care. Don't force them to do stuff that's seemingly just not comfortable for them. Because then what it does do is it just prevents them from knowing what the boundary is. Because mommy said I had to do it, or daddy said I had to do it. They don't know that if it goes further, that it shouldn't happen, because you've already pushed them to do something that they wasn't comfortable with from jump.
Right, right. That is a very great. That is a great point. It needs to be shouted on the mountaintops. I'm serious. Like that is a great point. Stop forcing your kids, grandkids, whoever's staying with you. Stop forcing them on adults, especially when you give these boundaries and tell them to do this in front of the adult. It's not like you're telling them, you know, behind closed doors before you leave, but you're saying in front of him, oh, go ahead and sit on his lap. Stop acting foolish. Don't do that. Because kids, to me, kids know more than we think they know. And I pay real close attention to a child that has an issue, or they start crying in front of a particular person, or they don't want, you know, they kind of pull back, and you know, adults tend to be like, oh well, or parents tend to be like, oh well, she act like that with him all the time. We have to pay more attention to our children. Just because they
Yes.
don't say nothing, that don't mean nothing's being done. You don't have to be overly protective, but take the time out to notice certain things. And if somebody in your family comes to you and say, I noticed this about this your child, or has he talked to you about this, or have you talked to her about this, and you get offended, so what? That's your business, because it's ultimately about the kid. So that was a great point. We don't talk, definitely don't talk about that enough.
No.
Ooh, so you mentioned about suffering in silence earlier, and so when you suffering in silence, to me, and I know it's different for everybody, it's just a, as they say, the devil's playground for just all kind of stuff to happen, depression, suicide, things of that nature to come up. Did you ever have those thoughts in any of the moments where you were being victimized?
No, not at the time, because I kind of just I created another personality. I created another person to kind of deal with it. And it was okay that so and so is going through that. It was just like I was like I'm there, but I'm not there. And it helped to deal with the pain of it, the physical pain of it, but also the pain of, for me, it was always, why doesn't my mom love me? You know, what can I do? So everything was, you suffer in silence because you want your mom to love you. So therefore it's like, well, I'm going to do this because obviously this is what she wants. So you kind of section yourself off, be like, that's the person that's going to do that. So I can still be this little girl that my mom's going to want to love. So you kind of compartmentalize all the different ones. This is going to be the one that does all that crazy stuff, but I'm going to be over here. I'm going to be the one that my mom will want to love and hopefully want to love. And it wasn't until counseling that I dealt with those different people that I had created in my mind to cope.
That was I'm sure that was a whole nother journey. And you probably didn't even think anything was wrong with the people, creating these people because you had created a safe place for yourself. And so what was your relationship? I know you said your mom passed. How old were you when she passed?
Oh my goodness, I was 18. It was about 5 months after my high school graduation.
So had y'all created a different type of relationship? How was y'all relationship from 16 to 18?
No, there was no relationship from the age of 9. 9 was the last time I saw her alive.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My grandmother took us.
Okay.
She took us to move to Massachusetts, and literally the state of Massachusetts had issued a warrant for her arrest, and they was like, if she stepped foot on state grounds, they were going to arrest her and prosecute her.
Ooh. I bet that was an emotional roller coaster right there, since you mentioned you were trying to gain her love. So
It was an emotional roller coaster, but I think at the time I put my feelings aside because my brother, because he suffered the majority of the physical abuse, had so many issues that everything was about making sure he was okay. So that's also what I learned in the process of being abused, that I didn't matter. So I would say it didn't matter what I felt. I needed to make sure that my little brother was okay, that he was going to be fine, that everything that, we did made sure that he had a stable life. So it didn't matter for me. And even some of my family said now they see, they do regret that all the attention was put on him, because they was like, oh, well, we didn't know anything was wrong. And it's just like, well, no, you wouldn't, because I even focused my energy on my little brother, and it was, as I got older, it was worse, because it was just like, now when you know what happened to you was wrong, and you don't have anyone to talk to, and you see how people talk about victims in the media, and it's just like, okay, I'm just never going to say anything. And so instead of doing anything about it, you go into destructive behaviors and hanging out in the street. I mean, and I was still an A student. I was still really great at school. I did everything well, but my street persona was tight. And I'm gonna be honest, I wouldn't think of taking my own life, but I sure did things in hopes that somebody would.
Mm. Mm. Wow. That's definitely a different perspective on it. We always talk about suicide and us taking our own lives, but never talked about wishing that somebody else would take your life, I'm sure, to get rid of the pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because then I guess, you heard how it was something I didn't understand then, but God had already placed something in me that I knew I had value. I just didn't know where to tap into it to. So if I killed myself, then I would deprive that. But if somebody else did it, it would be their fault. And it would be their fault that I didn't, get to go to my fullest potential, and I wasn't able to heal. So yeah, I did stuff. Dealing, I was probably one of the nicest dealers in Massachusetts at the time. Pimping, you name it. I did some crazy stuff, and being out in all times of the night in all types of environment and getting in altercations, hoping and praying that someone would put me out of my misery sometimes.
That's a powerful testimony. It just is. That's why this is so important, once again, just to shed light on some things, because you just don't know what a person is going through or have been through. And that life, the fact that it was like a skill that you learned to survive, no matter how painful it was for you. In the beginning, the middle, the end, it was a skill for you. It was a survival skill. And what age were you when you started pimping and dealing? Like, were you a teenager?
I was about 19.
19. So this continued after you graduated high school.
Yeah. I was 19. And it wasn't that it was an easy thing. It was, and I guess I was just a different type of pimp, because I was always protective of my girls, because I didn't want to put them in situations that was crazy, and and I had to fight a few Johns, like, you're not gonna put your hands on it was a weird type of thing. It was like, I know I'm doing this, but I'm still trying to protect you at the same time, because for some of them it clicked for me that what if something happened to them when they were my age, and all they're trying to do is to make ends meet, or to be able to put food on their table because they're hungry, because we've been there, done that. Or they're living in a car and they're trying to get money together so that they can put a deposit down so that them and their children can have a roof over their head. Been there, done that. So it was weird. It was like, I was still doing it, but it was just like I was making sure that they were safe at the same time. And when those two conflicted, and it was just like, okay, I can't keep doing this with them. It was just like them looking at resources that could help them get them off the streets. That's kind of what I did for them, and I stopped that. But my drug dealing, kept doing that for a while. Because to me, I was like, there's a sure way that I'm going to screw something up and somebody's going to take me out.
Wow. So you didn't deal for necessarily the money. You deal for the fact that I'm hoping that somebody takes this pain off of my shoulders, and I don't have to. They, like you said, they're the blame for killing me and not me killing myself.
Right.
So how were your relationships? Like, did you have any, your friendships, your love relationships? How were those?
Most of my relationships, and I have a couple of good friends, but I always presented myself as the strong one, the one that everybody could always go to. So a lot of them just didn't know that I was going through these challenges. As for romantic relationships, the underlying thought with them was, you're so hard to love. Oh my God. It was like one guy, he was like, I love you, but you just will not let me in, and it just would never work. I did get married. Did get married. That marriage lasted maybe 3.5 years. And it was just like, again, I remember going to counseling session with a minister friend, and he said to me, it's never going to work until you begin the healing process for those who abused you. And I looked at him, because I never told anybody. So I knew it was God speaking, through him. But I wasn't in a comfortable place to even talk about it with my husband. I didn't trust him enough with my heart, and that he had my best interest at heart, to even begin to have that conversation. So, you know, we did get divorced, and it's been 15 years now since we've been divorced. And I kind of just didn't go in relationships. At that point, to me, sex became a means to an end. So whether I had sex or not didn't matter. So it didn't matter to me at all. So I went years without engaging in any type of, you know, relationship, romantically, sexually, or anything like that. And when I moved to Atlanta, it was kind of the same way until about 3 years ago. And I got my first counseling session 2 months before I was to do my first speaking engagement. And it was because we was at a rehearsal, and all the things that I thought I had held in and I had did well and that I had it under control, I realized at that point I didn't have it under control. And I was working at the time and went to, you know, what they have, the life balance coaches. And I remember walking into her office, and she just took a look at me, and she was like, do you have insurance? And I said, yes. She's like, we're going to call behavioral services now. And she literally called, and they made an appointment for me to go in the next day. Because she was like, this is your option. You call and make the appointment, she says, or I'm having you involuntarily put in the hospital. And I remember that first counseling session, and it was the first time someone had told me that I was justified in feeling the way that I felt, and that it was okay. And I remember the psychologist saying, we need to put you on medicine. He says, but I'm not, because we don't have any history of you, you know, going to therapists. He says, but let me let you understand. He's like, you're so far down a rabbit hole, you don't even realize it. And he was like, it's just a matter of time. And if you don't really go through counseling, it's just a matter of time before you hurt somebody. And it was like, okay, it's time to, and that's when I began the counseling and began talking about things that I thought that, okay, I had just, you know, put behind. The good thing about this particular counselor, and she's still my counselor to this day, is she had experience in dealing with patients like me. And I remember when she gave me my diagnosis, and she cried because she didn't want to tell me what my diagnosis was, and which was I was diagnosed with clinical depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety disorder. And she cried because she was just like, I've never had anybody that had all of them. And she's like, and I just want you to know I'm a safe place. And from that point forward, I knew it was okay, you know, to talk to her and to get things out. And we had gotten to a point where, okay, I don't need drugs to manage my day to day. I didn't need to feel isolated, but, you know, it was learning how to deal with emotions. Like, I've never really felt. So when I was going through that and then going through other tragedies that was happening, I would call her and be like, this is how I feel and whatever. And she said, it's okay. She's like, if you wasn't feeling it, I would be concerned. She's like, you have 20 years of not feeling anything. So it's going to be hard the first initial time, because now you're allowing yourself to feel emotion and feel what it's like and to learn how to work through it. So counseling was amazing. It's been amazing for me.
Yes, that's good to hear. It's like that for me as well. Is everybody has their different way of seeking healing, but if counseling is the route for you to go, please find a way to go to counseling, because it can be an extreme lifesaver. What age were you when you first had your first counseling session?
I will be 40. I was 40.
Okay.
I'll be 44 this year. I was 40 years old.
Okay. And I'm glad that it's a great experience for you, because that matters as far as the time frame, the things that you went through, the time you actually sought out counseling, and the fact that that person said, this is a safe place, and this is where I want you to start your healing, and I'm here for you, made the difference. It just sound like it made the difference. And when you opened up and your healing journey began, actually, So, how do you continue to live every day? What are some things that you do to just keep being the best version of Juanita you can be?
What I've done is I have eliminated drama altogether. I have had to cut off, whether it's friends or family, those who just does not have my best interest at heart, who always it's about them. I learn and I come each and every day that I am not to get consumed with someone else's issues. I need to focus on me. And it's okay to focus on me, and that I am no longer ever going to feel guilty for focusing on me. You know, as victims at the initial time, we're always taught that we don't matter. So once you begin walking in healing, it's about you and it's not selfish. Please note that it is not selfish to focus on you, because if you're not the best version of you, you cannot be of service to anyone.
Mm.
So cut out the drama. If that means you got to come off of social media, if that means it's only for, hire a social media manager if you have a business. If that means you have to mute certain people on social media, block certain friends and family, do it. Drama only begets more drama, and then it takes you off course.
Absolutely. I agree with that 1000%, because everything that you can do to avoid being re-victimized or just bringing back a familiar emotion for yourself, you need to do that, because it's always about going forward and not going backwards. So, and thank you for your testimony. It was extremely powerful, and I know it helped somebody. It helped me. I learned something from everybody's testimony, so thank you so much. I have an expert on the line, a mental health and trauma expert, Miss Jewel Diamond, that I'm gonna bring on now. How you doing, Miss Jewel?
Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Thank you so much for being part of the. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's very intriguing and very insightful. And you may hear my grandbaby in the background because I've got him today. So I'm going to do my best to participate.
Okay.
And I want to thank Dr. Yetta Young for inviting me.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for being a
Dr.
part.
Yetta Young on the line?
She is. She's listening in. She's actually.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm here. I
Okay.
was muted, but I'm here with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a shout out. I know this was spontaneous, but so necessary. And as I said, I have my Cody in the background, 1 year old. Well, he may make some noise, so forgive me for that.
That's fine. We welcome Cody to the call too.
Yeah, but I just thought it was such in divine order that this telesummit was happening, because I teach twice a month in Southern California, and this just past Thursday, this was our topic, because my mandate, my main platform is teaching women emotional wellness. And so when I saw Yetta posting this, I thought I wanted to be a part of the conversation. And I'm not sure who we just listened to. What is the lady's name that just spoke?
It's Juanita.
Juanita. Yeah, I just wanted to give her a shout out and thank her for her courageousness, her transparency. It takes a lot of courage, and she's probably told the story many times, but I'm sure each time she shares it, she gets a little bit stronger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you get a little bit stronger because you start crossing the line from being the victim to being victorious. You start crossing the line from being the patient to being the teacher and a healer. And many of us are wounded healers. And so I'm just really inspired by this whole by this whole conversation, because it's so necessary. Because what I've been teaching is that the pain that we as women experience is multi-generational. It didn't just happen. You go all the way back to slavery and never having an opportunity to heal from the traumatic experiences that we had as slaves, and then to pass it on to mothers and fathers and grandparents, and then their pain is transferred onto another generation and another generation. And we are basically the first generation to have the courage and the disposable time and the resources to even put this on the table. So a lot of us are fumbling through these conversations because we don't really have a roadmap on how to do this. And even if we were to compare our trauma compared to other ethnic groups, it's different for African American sisters because it's multi-generational, going back to slavery. And so a lot of emotions and pain had to be suppressed. And whenever you suppress pain, suppression leads to depression. And the ultimate goal is expression. And that's where we are today, is expressing the pain without the shame, expressing the pain and no longer protecting the perpetrators, and even no longer protecting mama or dad or siblings, or protecting the perpetrator, which we tend to do because no one helped us to understand that they were wrong, and they were the person that should suffer, not you, because you're telling the truth. And so, yes. And so when we're able to speak our truth and find our voice that was suppressed as children, unfortunately, there's a residue of shame, and we should not feel the shame because we didn't do anything wrong. And so the first thing we want women to know is that you did nothing wrong. And I've even counseled women who said, you know what, Jewel, even though sometimes it felt good physically, I knew it was wrong. So in their mind, they're thinking, well, maybe I asked for this, or maybe I allowed it to continue because physically there may have been some good sensation, which leads to a woman becoming very promiscuous because she can no longer distinguish between those feelings and what was a violation and what was her body being awakened too soon. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Hello?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when women have told me, Jewel, you're the first person I told that it felt good. And it's like, I understand. The body is the body. And so the person takes advantage of that if they know how to craft themselves well to stimulate you in a certain way, depending on your age. Of course, a young child would not necessarily feel that because it's a lot of pain, excruciating pain. But if the perpetrator is very experienced at it, then they know how to stimulate a woman in a certain way to where it gets very confusing. And so going back to this idea that going from suppression to depression to expression is what we must do because we don't want to pass it on to the next generation. We have the advantage of just doing what we're doing today. No matter where we live, we can be talking, we could be connected, we could talk, we could share. This is why social media is so powerful, because there are a lot of people, that's their only connection. I see people as I scroll down that are on all day long documenting every little thing that they do, and it's a red flag. I've counseled with women who gave this image online that their life was so wonderful and so perfect, and then as I got to know them or counsel with them, that was just their mask. And so we learned to have a mask, and we learned to separate ourselves from the violation, and our mind goes someplace else while the body is being violated. The mind goes someplace else. So I've worked with women to help them understand this is why you are bipolar, or this is why. I've actually had women in my conferences or events or retreats, and I can tell right away when she's left the room, not physically, and it's a red flag, oh, this person has some type of trauma in her life, and she has learned how to escape and not be present when she's being abused, whether it's sexually or physically or even emotionally. And so I've had that experience in my life. There's a big block of my childhood I do not even remember. And my sisters experienced a lot of things, and each of us coped in different ways. And what we tend to do is go in and become very shy, very introverted, And then you end up doing things to get through life. You may not run to drugs. You may not run to alcohol. You may have affairs. You may shop too much. You may go for degree after degree after degree. You may go from job to job to job, church to church to church. You may become an extreme overachiever. You're restless. You're looking for something that validates you and tells you that you're a good person. Maybe you were not told by your parents that you were loved because they were broken. And so the sad thing that I'm seeing in society now is this, America is the #1 drug pusher. And they want to medicate us for everything and tell us that the brain is broken. The brain is not broken. The life was broken. And so, of course, there are some situations where people, will need some medication for a short term because they become very, very critical. But if we can connect with someone that still can be redeemed and still can learn to be resilient and learn to move forward, you don't need the medication. You need a safe place to cry, to share, to be honest, to be transparent, to take yourself off the hook, to forgive yourself, and to focus on your needs. But generally, as women, we have been taught by society to be nurturers to everyone else, and then we do that to the extreme that we never learn how to take care of ourselves. One of the greatest compliments that Dr. Yetta gave to me was saying that the events that she tends, that I produce, they are an act of self-care. And it really gave me a whole nother perspective of what I'm doing, because that's exactly what it is. Because I hear women saying, I'm just so overwhelmed, I'm tired, I'm burned out, my husband is possessive, my kids are demanding, my mother hates me, I hate my job. There's just all these intense emotions, but yet they cannot carve out some time for themselves, which is another red flag. I just had a long conversation yesterday with a sister, and she was saying, my husband doesn't want me to go to Hawaii, and I really need to go. I need to get away. I'm like, we are grown women. We are women who are working, taking care of the house, paying bills, taking care of everybody else, and yet we cannot give ourselves permission to heal. And I think part of that is that unconsciously we're afraid that if we put ourselves in a certain environment, those feelings will come to the surface, that the pain, we will feel the pain. And the pain, I have learned, is your friend. The pain is there to have you become more conscious, because we numb ourselves and we don't want to feel the pain. We think that if we feel the pain, we're going to die. And those of us that have given birth to children, we know that horrific pain. And then it subsides. We can take it physically, the pain. We can survive it if we have the right coping skills, we have the right environment to nurture it. And what happens with children that are in dangerous situations where they are isolated, where the parents are dysfunctional, the parents are high, or the parents are in prison, or the parents are fighting, or the parents have to work all hours of the day, then the child is susceptible to predators. And every child needs 4 things. They need to be seen, they need to be stable, they need to be secure, and they need to be soothed. And so if a child is in a situation where nobody sees them, they're so busy taking care of the child that may have a physical handicap, or taking care of the child who's a troubled child, or taking care of a parent who's an alcoholic, or the parent who's always fighting, and the child is never seen, and they're just put in front of a television or iPad and nobody sees the child begins to create his own world. And then the child becomes very susceptible to predators because nobody sees the child. They're too busy. And then the second thing, if a child is not in an environment where they're secure, where they're safe, then of course the predator can get them. Leaving children in the car by themselves, not watching the child at the park, not walking your child to school if you can. My husband is a driver, and sometimes he'll do Uber driving, and he said it's amazing how people will put a young child in a car with a total stranger to send them to the babysitter or send them to the grandparents' house or send them to school. It's just amazing what people will do, putting their children in such a dangerous situation. So that child is not insecure. And then the third thing, if a child doesn't have stability, if the child is moving from house to house, school to school, back and forth to different relatives, that child becomes traumatized because the child is not experiencing stability, the child is not experiencing security, the child is not seen, and the other thing, if the child is not soothed. We, as a people, are originally very tribal. We're very tribal people. But when the family was torn apart through slavery, when the family is torn apart through industrialization and technology, children are left crying. Children are left hungry. Children are just, even sometimes when I'm holding my grandson, people say, "Oh, you're holding him too much." I'm like, you know what? He's only going to be a baby for 2 years out of his life, a toddler. So I'm going to soothe him as much as I can. If he's crying, I'm going to look to his knees. But there's something in us that says, let them be, let them work it out. And it's like, they got plenty of time to be an adult. We have to soothe our children, make them feel loved and comforted and warm. So the trauma that a woman feels from being raped and having incest, one of those four things or all of those four things were missing in their childhood. And what happens, you grow up to be an adult looking to be soothed by a man or soothed by a woman, or you look for security in a job or security in your position, your title, or you look for stability and you stay a long time in a relationship that you don't really want to be in, but it's something that's stable. Or you look for, what was the other S I forgot, to be seen. You want to be seen. And so people will do things to be seen, to be a perfectionist, to be a high achiever. They could be what somebody would call a show-off, or they could be the kind of person who needs a lot of attention. These are signs of someone who didn't get it as a child. They didn't get the security. They didn't get the stability. And so I just applaud the women who are courageous today, who are saying, this is what happened to me. I do matter. My life matters. The women that are finding their voice. That has been my mission for 32 years, is helping women to find their voice, because I lost my voice as a child. And what happens when you, yes.
Hi, it's Yetta. We're at the top of the hour, and so our next speaker, Antoinette Gray, is on hold.
Okay.
I don't know if you're able to join us for the next call, but if so, we would greatly appreciate it. And if not, I would just like to let everyone know that they can follow up with you by going to your website at jeweldiamondtaylor.com or donotgiveup.net. And if you're in the Los Angeles area, to please join us. I'm a part of her Women on the Grow team. And like she said, it has really been the best self-care that I could give myself. And we'll be going to Hawaii in a couple of weeks. So there's different events within California that you can join us, as well as outside of California. Will you be able to stay with us on the call, Joel, for the next lady?
Yes, I'll just put it on mute, and thank you so much for the shout out. I will stay on the line.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Stand by.
Love you.
Love you too. Thank you.
And Miss Juanita, do you what's your social media information if someone want to reach out to you?
Okay, they can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Juanita E. Gaynor. That's JUANITA EGAYNOR. Or they can reach out to my foundation, Restore It to Life, and that's RESTOREDTOO Life, and it's the same on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Is that .com or .org?
Restored to Life is going to be restored, the number 2 life.org. And I think I'll type it in chat for you.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for your testimony and being a part of this telesummit. We really appreciate it. And again, just stay on the line for the next speaker, Ms. Antoinette Gray. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute this. We'll actually